The moment that nobody saw coming just shattered everything we thought we knew about loyalty and trust in the squared circle. Seth Rollins is about to expose the darkest secrets of his former mentor Paul Heyman, and this revelation will change WWE forever. Make sure you subscribe because what happens next will blow your mind, and this is the kind of story that defines careers and creates lifelong enemies in professional wrestling. Seth Rollins stood in the center of the ring with his heart racing at 1,000,000 beats per minute. His face was covered in sweat and his hands were trembling as he processed what had just happened moments before. Paul Heyman, the man who had guided him through darkness and light, the man who had whispered strategies in his ear during the most crucial moments of his career, had turned his back on him in the most brutal fashion imaginable. The crowd erupted into a deafening roar as Seth's eyes locked onto the entrance ramp where Brock Lesnar stood with his arms folded across his massive chest, a smirk plastered across his face that seemed to suggest he had known about this betrayal all along. For weeks, the tension had been building between Seth and Paul. What started as minor disagreements about strategy had evolved into something far more sinister. Paul had been whispering different messages to different wrestlers, playing both sides of the fence with a mastery that only someone with his experience could achieve. Seth had trusted him completely, opening his heart and his inner circle to a man who had become more than just an advisor. Paul was like a father figure, someone who had shown him the path to greatness and helped him navigate through the treacherous waters of professional wrestling where one wrong move could end everything. But that trust was now shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. The betrayal stung deeper than any physical blow could ever deliver. Paul had walked away with Brock Lesnar, joining forces with the Beast incarnate at a moment when Seth needed him most. The Crown Jewel event was supposed to be Seth's moment to shine, his chance to prove that he was the best wrestler in the entire world. Instead, he found himself standing alone in the ring, watching his former mentor celebrate with his new client. Seth's reaction in the aftermath was absolutely raw and unfiltered. He dropped to his knees in the middle of the ring, not out of weakness but out of a burning desire to channel this pain into pure rage. The visionary had been betrayed by the wise man. The student had been cast aside by the teacher. And somewhere deep within the darkness of Seth Rollins' psyche, something shifted. Something awakened. Something dangerous began to emerge from the ashes of his broken trust. When Seth finally got back to his feet, his eyes had changed completely. The light that had been there moments before had been replaced by something cold and calculated. He pointed directly at Paul Heyman and mouthed words that would later echo throughout the entire WWE universe. He was going to make them both pay for this transgression. He was going to prove that he didn't need anyone's guidance or support to become the greatest wrestler of all time. His journey would now take him through hell itself if that's what it took to climb back to the top. The promos that followed were absolutely incredible. Seth took to the microphone and poured out his emotions with a level of vulnerability that his fans had never witnessed before. He talked about how Paul had manipulated him, how every piece of advice had been calculated to benefit Brock Lesnar instead of Seth Rollins himself. He described feeling like a puppet whose strings were being pulled by a master manipulator who had been playing the game longer than anyone else in the industry. The crowd hung on every word as Seth's voice cracked with emotion and intensity. But then Seth did something unexpected. Instead of just wallowing in his pain and sadness, he transformed it into fuel for his fire. He declared that this betrayal was the best thing that could have ever happened to him because now he was free. Free from the influence of Paul Heyman. Free from the chains of relying on anyone else's wisdom. Free to become the most powerful version of himself without any distractions or complications. He was going to go into Crown Jewel 2025 and he was going to prove to the entire world that Seth Rollins was a force of nature that could not be stopped by anyone or anything. The storyline gained serious momentum as the weeks progressed toward the Crown Jewel event. Seth began having encounters with various wrestlers who tried to help him process his emotions about the betrayal. Some of them sympathized with his pain while others tried to take advantage of his vulnerability and distracted mental state. Seth turned down all offers of assistance because he had learned a valuable lesson from the Paul Heyman situation. He was not going to put his faith in anyone else ever again. He was going to walk his path alone and he was going to emerge victorious through sheer force of will and determination. The psychological warfare that Paul and Brock launched against Seth was absolutely relentless. They showed highlight reels of moments where Paul had allegedly sabotaged Seth's efforts during important matches. They questioned whether Seth had ever actually achieved anything without Paul's guidance whispering in his ear. They suggested that Seth was nothing more than a lost puppy who needed a master to survive in the wrestling world. Every word was designed to cut deep and make Seth question his own abilities and his own worth as a performer. But Seth refused to break under the pressure. Instead of internalizing the negativity, he used it as motivation to work harder in his training. He spent countless hours in the gym pushing his body to its absolute limits. He studied his opponents with a precision that bordered on obsessive. He visualized his victories in the Crown Jewel event with such clarity that he could taste the success before he even stepped into the ring. His coaches and trainers noticed a change in him, a burning intensity that had never been present before the betrayal. The night of Crown Jewel 2025 finally arrived and the entire wrestling universe was on the edge of their seats wondering what would happen when Seth Rollins stepped into the ring to confront Paul Heyman and Brock Lesnar. The event had built up to this moment with an intensity that few matches in wrestling history had ever achieved. Every segment of the show was designed to lead up to the confrontation between these three people whose fates were now forever intertwined. When Seth's music hit, the crowd erupted into an explosion of noise that shook the entire arena. He walked down the ramp with a confidence that seemed almost supernatural in nature. His eyes were locked onto the ring and he was focused on only one thing, proving to Paul and Brock that he was more than capable of standing on his own 2 feet and becoming the victor in this conflict. The Visionary had evolved into something even more powerful and dangerous than anyone had anticipated. The match that unfolded was absolutely spectacular from start to finish. Seth brought everything he had learned throughout his entire career and combined it with this new intensity that had been born from the pain of betrayal. Every strike landed with precision. Every counter came at the exact right moment. Every high-flying maneuver was executed with perfection that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The crowd was completely invested in every single second of the action. Brock Lesnar came at Seth with his usual brute force and power, but Seth was ready for everything. He had studied the beast incarnate thoroughly and he knew exactly which buttons to push and when to push them. When Brock tried to use his superior strength to gain the advantage, Seth relied on his speed and agility to slip away and strike from unexpected angles. The match became a battle of wills and determination as two completely different wrestlers tried to impose their will upon the other. Paul Heyman was at ringside shouting instructions and encouragement to Brock, but Seth could see through the manipulation now. He understood the games being played and he was not going to fall victim to any of them. When Paul tried to interfere in the match, Seth cut him off with a look that was absolutely chilling. The betrayal was complete, but so was Seth's transformation into a warrior who no longer needed anyone else's guidance or support. The finish of the match came when Seth executed a perfect suplex from the top rope that sent Brock crashing to the canvas with tremendous impact. Seth rolled over and covered Brock for the pin and the referee counted 1, 2, 3. The crowd went absolutely wild as Seth Rollins stood victorious over Brock Lesnar, and in doing so he proved that he was capable of overcoming anything that was thrown in his path. After the match ended, Seth grabbed a microphone and delivered a statement that would echo through wrestling history. He looked directly at Paul Heyman and told him that this victory was proof that everything Paul had taught him had been wrong. Seth had succeeded not because of Paul's guidance but in spite of it. Paul was nothing more than a parasite who fed off the success of others, and Seth had finally freed himself from that toxic relationship. Seth then addressed the entire crowd and thanked them for standing by him through this entire ordeal. He told them that witnessing their unwavering support had given him the strength to overcome the darkness and emerge on the other side as a better version of himself. He promised that from that moment forward, Seth Rollins would be an unstoppable force of nature that could not be stopped by anyone or anything. The Visionary had been reborn and he was ready to claim his rightful place at the top of the wrestling world. The aftermath of Crown Jewel 2025 saw massive changes in the WWE landscape. Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman parted ways after their loss at the event, with Brock retreating into the shadows to recover from his defeat. Paul tried to find new clients to represent, but many wrestlers had witnessed his manipulation and betrayal of Seth Rollins and they wanted nothing to do with someone so willing to turn on his own. The Wiseman found himself isolated in a world where reputation meant everything. Seth Rollins moved forward on his own path, refusing to align himself with any faction or manager. He proved night after night that he had the ability to compete at the highest level without any assistance or guidance from anyone else. His matches became legendary performances that fans talked about for years to come. He won championship after championship and solidified his legacy as one of the greatest wrestlers to ever step between the ropes. The betrayal that had devastated him became the catalyst for his greatest success. Seth had learned that sometimes the most painful moments in life can become the foundation for the most incredible achievements. He had learned that true strength comes from within and that relying too heavily on others can be a weakness in disguise. He had learned that loyalty is something that must be earned every single day and that trust should never be given blindly without careful consideration. And so the legend of Seth Rollins only continued to grow stronger with each passing event. The Visionary had become the embodiment of perseverance and determination. The Crown Jewel 2025 event would forever be remembered as the night when Seth Rollins proved to the entire world that he was destined for greatness. Make sure you subscribe to see what Seth Rollins accomplishes next, because this journey is far from over and the best is still yet to come.